Hey everybody, welcome to Drop Dead Serious and the Vermont Outpost. Thank you so much for being here, and please hit subscribe. Super big favor. I'd appreciate it so much. And thank you if you've already subscribed, and also thank you if you're a member. I really appreciate you. Little different today. You know, I do true crime, right? But I also do mystery. And I'm telling you that whenever I see a story about UFOs, to me, that is mystery with a capital M. And there is a story about a mysterious disappearance in the United States right now that I got my eye on. I don't know if you've heard about retired Air Force Major General William Neil McCasland. He has seemingly vanished in New Mexico. And his disappearance is really gripping everybody across the nation because it just doesn't feel like it's any other missing person investigation. It's not the run of the mill. And I'll tell you why in a second. So General McCasland is kind of a critical character in the world of UFO lore, right? And the story that I'm about to tell you really sits at the intersection of two very different stories. One is the confirmed missing persons case, right? That law enforcement in the state of New Mexico is working on right now and very actively. But the other story is the very big wave of speculation that has taken over online because of who General Neil McCasland is. And he's William Neil McCasland, but he goes by Neil. What he did during his military career is a BFD, big deal. And the people that he was later connected to after retirement, also very important. So I want to start with the confirmed facts in his case. According to the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, General Neil McCasland was last seen on Feb 27, about 11 o'clock in the morning, in the area of Quail Run Court, northeast. That's in Albuquerque. The authorities say that he left his home on foot, but that he left his phone and his watch behind. That's weird. So, not unlike what happens when elderly citizens disappear, a silver alert was issued. Because he had some unspecified medical concerns. And investigators have been asking the public, if you know anything, please call in. They need tips. And let me just start by saying, if you know anything with regard to Major General McCasland's disappearance, here are some critical numbers for you. And I'd love it if you'd put this out on your social media. You can call tips to the sheriff's office at 505-468 7070. Again, 505-468-7070, or you can text. And the number to text is 847411. So text 847411 and then text the letters BCSO and your tip. So General McCasland's wife has said that search efforts have included some pretty vast groups, right? There are official teams, there are friends, there are neighbors, there are people on horseback, there are drones, there are helicopters. 3 different kinds of search dogs are out there. They're canvassing the neighborhood. They're checking for ring cams and wildlife cam footage. Investigators have even gone much wider than the immediate neighborhood where the McCaslands live. There is reporting this week that says authorities have contacted more than 600 homeowners in the entire area near where Neil McCasland and his wife live, asking for security cam footage, any kind of Ring doorbell camera, doorbell cams, any kind of information that could help reconstruct where the general went after leaving his house. Quick note from my sponsor, if your teenager is glued to their phone 8 hours a day, barely sleeping or obsessing over how they look, you need to stop scrolling and listen. We used to think that this was just a phase, but there are new reports out there suggesting these platforms were designed to keep our kids addicted. I'm talking about anxiety spikes, body dysmorphia, and the rage that you see when you try to take that phone away. I've lived it. It's not bad parenting. It is more like the possibility an algorithm trained to keep them hooked at any cost. And honestly, it's heartbreaking to watch them struggle. There are finally legal steps being taken, though, to fight to hold these platforms accountable. If this sounds like your family, don't ignore it. Check the link below. It takes 60 seconds to see if you qualify for help. The FBI is involved in this case, and that's not weird, right? Because in Nancy Guthrie's case, the FBI is involved. In a lot of missing persons cases, the FBI could be involved. But what's interesting about General McCasland's case is that Kirtland Air Force Base is also involved. Sheriff's Office says that as of now, investigators have uncovered no evidence of foul play, but they are still considering all possible scenarios. And that's really where the case stands. The general is still missing right now. Authorities are still looking for footage and tips and asking the public and asking witnesses, everything, right? They're trying to figure out what happened after he left home on Feb 27. But the reason this case has jumped beyond the local news so quickly is because General Neil McCasland is not just any retired official. A major general is a big deal, right? But he's also a unique big deal. According to his Air Force biography, he graduated from the Air Force Academy with a degree in astronautical engineering and later earned a graduate degree from MIT, and then served in a series of high-level roles, including space research, acquisition, operations, and special programs. He commanded the Phillips site of the Air Force Research Laboratory at Kirtland. He served as director of space acquisition and then as director of special programs at the Pentagon, and later became commander of the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright Patterson. Remember that name, Wright Patterson. That's going to feature prominently in the interview I'm about to do with one Ben Hansen, UFO Discovery, guy who knows everything there is to know about anything UFO related in America and beyond. So wait for it. So the resume of General McCasland is what has driven so much public fascination with his disappearance, because once his disappearance became public, people immediately began looking not only at his military service, but also at the UFO and UAP conversations that have surrounded parts of his post-retirement life. And that's where Ross Coulthart comes in. And you know Ross, right? Ross Coulthart, also sort of the guru of all things UAP and UFO. And in a recent podcast segment, he argued that General Neil McCasland is one of the most significant figures to ever be linked to the disclosure conversation around unidentified aerial phenomena. The disclosure conversation is, is the government at some point going to spill the beans? Tell us all about what's real and what's not when it comes to aliens among us or not, right? So the disclosure conversation, Ross Coulthart says, the general was very involved in this potentially. Ross described the general as someone who has served at the highest levels of the Air Force and defense world with oversight of classified aerospace and special programs. And Ross is questioning why the general's disappearance isn't getting a lot more national coverage. And I get it. America's at war with Iran right now. Nancy Guthrie's case has really just absorbed so many headlines. But in the meantime, for the last couple of weeks, General McCasland has been gone. And there haven't been a lot of national headlines about it. So Ross Coulthart's argument is that if somebody with Neil McCasland's background vanishes, this should not be treated as a local missing persons case. This should be a matter of broader national concern, like the broadest. He also zeroed in on several details that, in his view, make the disappearance of General McCasland especially difficult to dismiss as ordinary. In his telling, Neil McCasland was physically fit, familiar with the area, and not the kind of person who would simply vanish on a neighborhood trail without some kind of an explanation. Ross Coulthart also raised the fact that Neil McCasland left his phone and his watch behind, and he openly speculated about whether that meant the general may have gone to meet someone or maybe did not want to be tracked wherever he was going. Again, that's not law enforcement saying that. It's Ross Coulthart saying that. But laying out the questions that he thinks the public maybe should be asking. And the reason that Ross Coulthart puts so much weight on Neil McCasland specifically is because of the role that he believes McCasland played in the early disclosure world around Tom DeLonge and the broader UAP conversation. I'm going to dig way deep into that in just a hot minute. Neil McCasland's wife, Susan McCasland Wilkerson, has confirmed that her husband did have a brief association with the UFO community after retirement. According to her statement, which was posted on Facebook, she says that he worked with Tom DeLonge for a period as an unpaid consultant on military and technical matters in order to lend realism to Tom DeLonge's fiction and media projects. And she also said that that connection later faded and should not be exaggerated into something that it wasn't. That point is important because Neil McCasland's wife has now publicly addressed what she called misinformation around this missing persons case. She said very, very clearly that her husband does not have dementia and was not confused or disoriented. She went even further than that. She said in her statement, she said that although Neil had access to highly classified programs during his career, he retired nearly 13 years ago. And she says it seems highly unlikely that anyone would take him to extract what she called very dated secrets. I'm going to get into that in a moment too. She also rejected rumors about a phone call, right? This is apparently a phone call from Friday morning to a relative. She says that call and anything that anyone's ascribing to it is just fabrication. She said she does not believe that Neil was abducted for classified information or because of his brief association with the UFO community. She also addressed one of the most repeated online claims directly, saying he does not have special knowledge about extraterrestrial bodies or Roswell debris supposedly stored at Wright Patterson. And at the end of her statement on Facebook, she said this: maybe the best hypothesis is that aliens beamed him up to the mothership. However, no sightings of a mothership hovering above the Sandia Mountains have been reported. Obviously, that sounds sarcastic, but you can tell that she's either pissed about something or annoyed, or maybe both. And I'm going to discuss that statement as well, because I think it's important what she said. So I called someone I turn to all the time for all things UFO, Ben Hansen. You probably already know who Ben Hansen is, but if you don't, let me just give you the quick 1-2 on him. So he is a television host. He's got shows on the Travel Channel, on the History Channel. He was so famous, obviously, for UFO Discovery, which is still airing. And he also is a former federal agent with the FBI. So he knows a thing or two, not only about how the federal government works, but also how the UFO world works. And so he's the guy I called to ask all things about the missing general. Here's our conversation. So Ben, what do you make of this extremely mysterious disappearance of General McCasland?
Well, I think it is extremely mysterious. That kind of sums it up. There's a lot of people out there right now who are speculating. The conspiracies, of course, are coming out. Here's what we have. I mean, first off, this gentleman, patriot, Major General, Air Force, if you look at his credentials, a lot of people pointed out, I don't think you could have a more senior person in so many aspects of research and development, special programs within the Pentagon. And if you were to say, hey, who could I talk to who might know secrets about UFOs and crash retrievals? As Ross Coldhart pointed out, this guy's at the top of the list, right? So when someone like that goes missing and you pair it with the timing, which is what a lot of people are pointing out, the timing of President Trump's announcement that he's going to start releasing UFO files, that's what makes it suspicious. Now, in itself, we'll say none of that. And you just had this older gentleman, and he goes missing. They put out a silver alert. You still might get some resources like Sheriff's Department, obviously, and search and rescue teams out looking for him. But one of the questions people are bringing up is, okay, well, why all the federal agencies? Why have we got the Air Force Special Investigations? Why do we have the FBI? And that can be explained really simply. When somebody has top secret SCI, compartmented security clearances for that many years, you have a lot of knowledge in your head. You have a lot of things that we don't want foreign adversaries to have. And so you're kind of looking, I call it playing offense and defense. If someone like that goes missing, we're not only worried about did they voluntarily leave and go meet up with somebody to transfer information that's classified and they shouldn't, but we're also worried about the defense. Did somebody take them? right? Someone who wanted that information. And so that's where we can get into all the details of the mystery of how he disappeared.
So like you said, Ross Coulthart described the general, and I'll use his words, as someone who had served at the highest levels of the Air Force and defense world with oversight of classified aerospace and special programs. And Ross was saying that this should be treated a lot less like a local disappearance and something far bigger and should have far more headlines. Do you think the response is appropriate?
Well, as far as two things, right? You got the media response, which we're caught in this media cycle where I don't know if you could have many more things going on. So it's kind of hard to squeeze in another story that people are going to follow detail. But the other response from the different agencies and who's involved, I do think it is appropriate. And he makes a great point there. UFOs aside, right? If you had just been he was the director of research and development at Wright Patterson, right? All of the space weapons and projects that he was working on, special access programs within the Pentagon, he's a director over special programs. All of that, it doesn't matter if you left last month or 10, 15 years ago. A lot of that technology is still highly classified. So each one of those agencies are going to want to know, is there a motive here from him? Is he purposely going out? Take for example, the fact that he left his phone and his watch. Okay, these are deliberate, in my mind, deliberate things. Who of us leaves the house without our phone, knowing that you're going to be gone for more than like 10 minutes, right?
Even
we
then.
depend on that, right? We'll turn around and go back and drive. I will drive a half an hour to go back to my house if I know I'm going to be without my phone for the day, right? So he's an avid cyclist, a runner. I don't know if he normally carries his phone, but I'd imagine so. Right? You can be out there and something could happen. You twist an ankle, whatever. You got to pay for something with your phone or watch. So the fact that he left it there, and that we could go down a whole other road of speculation here, because don't judge me here getting into the mind of a criminal, but if you're going to commit a crime, right, you don't turn your phone off, right, for tracking. You leave it at the house, right, for you future criminals out there, because you want to show that there was nothing out of the ordinary, that the phone, it could be tracked by cell phone pings and everything historically later. It could show where it was. If you're concerned about the phone being used as wiretapping, where it could be activated and you could hear what's going on. So let's say I have a secret meeting with somebody, and I want to leave my phone at home. That's another thing that you could do, And then finally, related to the tracking, there are people who, in the secret squirrel world, you're called to a meeting or you've got to deploy overseas. You do not bring your personal phone. You leave that there at home. Everything that identifies you, if you're traveling undercover, you leave all of that at home, and then you get a burner phone. You get a phone and new credentials and everything. But the problem with that theory is that even though there's a lot you have to keep from your spouse who doesn't have that access, you would at least going to tell your spouse, I'm gone for work. And you might be able to, I can't tell you where I'm going, but I'm leaving my phone and stuff here. Usually there's a third-party emergency number. You can get a hold of them if you have to, right? So if we're trying to guess why that would happen, I just find at the very least it's very suspicious that someone would just leave their phone. I would not leave my phone unless I was like, hey, the garbage man's coming. I got to take the garbage out, and I leave it, right, just for that moment. But then what? You're probably in your robe or your pajamas, and you're not ready for the day. So where is he?
Well, I could see someone maybe. It's unusual, but maybe going out for a run without their phone because it's a big brick. But generally speaking, you would want something, usually your watch, to keep an eye on the time or the miles that you're going, or you'd want to track your run or something. So I do think that is very strange. But, it's and this is a tough one too, because you don't want to, cast aspersions on someone who could honestly be a victim here, but this potential that maybe there was a clandestine meeting that he was going to take. And it's just impossible to know. Maybe he didn't share it with his wife, or if he did share it, she's not sharing publicly. But Let's go to the issue of the Wright Patterson Air Force Base and the significance of his connection to it, and why in the UFO community this is everything.
So yeah, for those who aren't as well versed into this, and I've been looking at it since I was a kid, a little nerd, 8 years old or so. The lore, I call it lore, but that is now backed up by plenty of evidence that what happened, the 1947 Roswell crash. Shortly after that, we're talking within months, we had several things established. We had the NSA, the beginnings, the CIA, the Air Force was created. It was the Army Air Force before then. And Wright Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio became the center, the headquarters for the new Air Force. And when the Roswell 1947 crash happened, we have plenty of evidence of the pilots who actually flew the debris, picked it up. Now, you can debate all day long about whether it was man-made, foreign, or extraterrestrial, but we know where it went and where it stopped, Texas, and then part of it went one way, and part of it, we definitely know, went to Wright Patterson, because that was home of the Foreign Technology Division, or at the time, I believe it was called the Air Material Command. I don't know if foreign technology was around until a little bit later. This is where you took everything that crashed. If you had a Russian or Chinese craft, anything, you bring it there, we back engineer it, we try to figure out how it works. Then later, a couple years later, in the 50s, was when Project Blue Book, the Air Force's official investigation into UFOs, was headquartered, right? Then you had the research and development, which is headquartered there still. So just about everything that the Air Force does with technology testing, back engineering, all of that happens at Wright Patterson. So he was, as I understand it, he was the director of research and development, there at Wright Patterson, and also represented, I believe it was Phillips, or one of the contractors, who's in charge of all the programs there, with their development. So a lot of things that he was privy to. As a side note, my own grandfather went there on temporary duty assignments in the 60s. And when he would leave, he would tell my grandma, he's like, hey, can't tell you where I'm going. They're going to come pick me up in a car, and he'd be gone for 1 to 2 weeks. He was working underground. There's an extensive underground system of hangars and tunnels, which they still deny to this day, which is kind of funny.
But your grandpa told you.
Well, yeah. When he was dying of cancer, he came to my father because my father's pretty upset. He's like, when you go on these assignments, you're gone for weeks. We can't get a hold of you by phone. And where are you? And he told him, not everywhere I work has a phone because I've been underground. So it was very frustrating to my father. Didn't know when he'd come home. But it's another story for another day. But we feel like we connected him to possibly some of these UFO alleged crashes that took place, where they would then take the debris, because we have witnesses who said, yes, that stuff went to Wright Patterson. So,
And you have a timeline that connects him?
a timeline, you said?
Like, do you have a timeline that connects your grandfather to these particular episodes?
Yeah. He didn't keep an extensive journal, but my father remembers things like he didn't show up. He was out of town for like a really important basketball game that my dad had, and he really wanted him to be there. And my dad has this impeccable, memory for dates and things. And so we lined that up like, oh, wow, that was the week of the Kecksburg UFO crash in the 1960s. And there are witnesses who said they brought that debris to the backfield, and Grandpa gets a call the next morning, get on a plane, come out here, right? And he had told my my father that he was basically at 12, 13 years old, he was to be in charge when he was gone, because he was part of a team, he said, that had to be called at a moment's notice. So, I mean, we love to speculate. Yeah, I love Grandpa that on his deathbed, I wish he would have divulged something to us, but at the end of it, he did say we're not alone and don't be afraid. So, I mean,
That is a topic for a whole other, and I am going to ask you to sit with me to tell me Grandpa's stories for an entire episode. Will you do that?
For sure, for sure.
Oh, no wonder you're in the field you're in, Ben. I had no idea you had that in your background. That's amazing.
And we didn't know either. I had an interest in this well before I knew my grandpa could have been involved. But so to answer the question, Wright Patterson is kind of ground zero for all research development, very key to the Roswell, and every crash retrieval pretty much that followed for decades would have had some involvement there.
So General McCasland, as head of research, would have known pretty much everything. Or do they have silos even within that, Wright Patterson Air Force Base program?
I think absolutely. It's very compartmentalized. When my grandpa worked there, he only talked to people by he only knew their first names. And what they would do is they'd bring people in across the country from different parts. Instead of just using their own talent and employees, they're on base because they didn't want them talking, when this was all over. So he worked alone quite often. He would come in for a few weeks, do his thing. He would leave, and then you wouldn't know how to contact each other. You were encouraged not to really associate with others. Now, somebody such as the general here, who was the director, I would think, and it depends on the years that he served and what was going on, but you got to know not only what's currently on your base and what secrets need to be protected, but also what came before you, right? You got to, I believe, got to know some of that. So it's all speculation, and that's why his wife, Susan, I think, was trying to put the kibosh on some of this. But let's face it, and Ross makes a great point, some others do too, that's not something you're going to tell your spouse anyways. Things that I worked on, the details of which I could be general and say, hey, we're working on an international kidnapping case. But your spouse is not going to get to know or shouldn't know any of the details that the normal public does not. And so that's what baffles me, is like, that's great, and I feel really bad for her and her family. But at the end of the day, we just don't know what he knew and if that has anything to do with the disappearance.
Well, then let me pull on that thread, because again, there will be a lot of people watching this right now who know everything about Wright Patterson, about Project Blue Book. They know all about General McCasland, but there'll be people who are listening who don't. So what are some of the prevailing theories right now from those who do follow the general and his body of work as to what might have happened to him?
Well, I think his wife addressed some of that on Facebook, where it was probably getting to her and the family because the rumors have gone rampant. But one of them, I guess, to the disappearance was, did he suffer from dementia? And she pretty quickly said he did not. He had a medical condition. They don't say what, but it was not dementia or Alzheimer's. He was of sound mind. I think Ross Coulthart also has a lot of people who know him, and his running group that he's a part of, he's very sharp. He's very active. He just did a 60-mile bike ride, I think, not too long before he disappeared. So that not being a factor, okay, then why would somebody of sound mind wander away from the house? And I think the prime theories are, one, he was going to meet somebody. Maybe he didn't expect that he wouldn't return. Or two, he was taken, right? And so by force. And that's why Sheriff's Department, I believe was the agency that did it, just recently put out a call to everybody, I think over 500 or so different citizens in that neighborhood, asking them to please voluntarily turn over their footage from any cameras that they have, Ring cameras, house surveillance cameras, because we don't, at this point, at least the public, from what I've seen, we don't even know if he wandered out the door on foot or if a car picked him up, right? And so that's kind of where you have to start.
Right. And they've canvassed several hundred people and asked for their video. And let's hope that the topography and the neighborhoods are more yielding to this kind of video than the Nancy Guthrie case, because that neighborhood was just very difficult, and any doorbell cams don't necessarily go out to the road simply. So maybe there will be something that they can get a trail at least going, or with license plate readers follow a vehicle if there is one. But But overall, there are a lot of people who believe that, General McCasland would be a target for some people. Who?
Well, and maybe let's just say it was Russian intelligence, right, or Chinese or North Korean, whatever country adversary you want to insert there. If they were wanting, they're watching the news as well, and they probably have more information than we do about these rumors that Trump was going to release files of something of the UFOs. So if they too are involved in this game, if you want to call it that, and people believe there is a race for technology going on, is it not been, if multiple countries are privy to an alien intelligence or back engineering, why haven't one of them come forward and just done it, right, and disclosed it? And there's this idea that maybe we're at a stalemate, and that because of the implications of how this might go down for society or other reasons, that no one themselves has done it yet. And if they believe that Trump is now at the point where he wants to do that, so the theory goes, right, that they want to be up and have the upper hand, right? They either want to stall that, they want to slow it down or prevent it from happening at all. And so let's say that this general was on that short list of people who may have been slated to come forward. Then you go and pick him up and nab him and do whatever to get the information, or just keep him back, or, heaven forbid, something worse. Right? So that's one of the theories.
Would we not know that by now? And I only say that because if, Donald Trump had planned some kind of very fulsome disclosure, and it seems that he had something up his sleeve, wouldn't we already know if General McCasland was part of all of that? Quick note from my sponsor. Think all those natural products that you're buying from wholesome mom and pop companies are really wholesome? Not quite. Many have been bought out by mega corporations and private equity firms who hijack the brands and then load them up with corporate slop. But one company is doing things differently, the Van Man Company. They started the grass-fed tallow trend a couple years back with moisturizers, and they have been crushing it ever since with their nearly edible products. Tallow works because its fatty acids are nearly identical to the oils in your own skin, so your body actually recognizes it. It can replace your lotion, your night cream, your wrinkle cream, even Neosporin and diaper balm. And it's powerful enough to heal your skin, yet safe enough to spread it on your toast, i.e. real ingredients. Are you ready to ditch the corporate chemicals? I know I am. Go to vanman.shop/Banfield and use my code Banfield to get 15% off your first order. That's vanman.shop/Banfield and use my code Banfield for 15% off your first order. Or you can just click the link in the description. Van Man, real ingredients, no exceptions.
Not necessarily. A lot of the legislation, if people have been following it, there were, in the National Defense Authorization Act, the last one, they gutted it and took out this whistleblower protection, right? And I think if that's the route that Trump wants to go, he wants it to be more than just an executive order. A lot of people may not trust that, right? They want it codified in an act of Congress so that it becomes law, so that they get protections. So let's say he was holding back. Let's say he had a lot to say, and maybe he was waiting for the right time where he at least had those protections in place. And that's one of the other rumors, is that he was going to do this under Hillary Clinton's prospective presidency, when she was thought to be the one that would be the next president. That this discussion with Podesta is, they were gearing up. Podesta, of course, was their guy in the street, to go and push forward the disclosure. And so they were hoping perhaps that was going to take place in her presidency. And when it didn't, maybe he got kind of shelved for a moment. He's like, well, I still need the president's backing. I still need these assurances, for my safety and everything else. And so we wouldn't necessarily know what he knows yet. I mean, that, again, I'm just repeating what people are saying, but we have to look at each of these with some open-mindedness.
But don't we think it's odd that as many men and women like your grandfather had these secrets and took them to their deathbed, that they didn't package them up and put them in a safety deposit box for someone at some point? I just find it so strange that over the decades, the number of people who would have been exposed to these secrets, that somebody hasn't told his grandson.
Well, they have. They have. A lot have. I've talked to a lot of them that have. But you're right. We almost tore his house apart, and we're still looking for things. You know, maybe he hid it somewhere. Was this secluded? It can drive you crazy. But we had a different time period then, too. You remember that what we call patriots today is a little bit different than what patriots were like then. They trusted their government a whole lot more than we do, if you look at the surveys. Right? And even if you were asked to do something you didn't believe in, you at least believe that your government in the long term or the high level perspective knows what it's doing. And you would keep your oaths, you know, to your deathbed. And I think my grandfather was one of those men, but I have a lot more examples of people who did let it slip at the end. And they said, you know, forget it. I need to tell my son, as I'm lying here, not only did I work on these projects, but here's some details of what we know. If people want to look up Black Mac Magruder, you can look that up. Mark Magruder was his son, and he was a colonel in the Air Force, which, well, in World War II, it wasn't the Air Force, but he flew for the Marines. And anyways, his second career, when he left, was to go back, and they consulted with him on the problem that they had with the crash retrievals, the bodies, the craft that they had at Wright Patterson. And on his deathbed, he spilled it, pretty much everything that he could for his kids, and they're like writing it all down, you know. So it does happen, but I think we will see more and more of that coming forward, that some of them are just waiting for the right time. And they're wanting to make sure that canary in the mine is still singing, you know, what's happening to other people before I come out.
Well, yeah. And of course, as you mentioned earlier, that with all the silos and the individualistic work that they were all doing, one person spilling his guts at his deathbed is just one piece of a very big puzzle. And do you have any idea what President Trump was referring to when he talked about the big disclosures that are coming? Like, do you know what part, which, like a comprehensive disclosure or a piece here and there? Like, do you have any idea, or does anyone have any idea?
Well, I mean, this is fun. It's very frustrating because I'm reading the tea leaves just like everybody else. In fact, just yesterday, I would have to look and see exactly. It came from a few sources that one of the main people promulgating that, I guess you could call it a rumor, that he had a speech prepared on the anniversary of Roswell. He feels like now that he was fed disinformation, his supposed inside sources have gone cold on him. And if that's the case, it's really sad, because the point of that would be to maybe get us to what I'd say disclosure exhaustion, you know, or disclosure, something akin to that. Just we're just done with it because our chain has been jerked so many times, and we're promised things and nothing happens. So, rumored he was going to come out in July, but then we'll go to all these things because I'm sure some of your listeners have remember a couple weeks ago Obama had come out and said that aliens are real, but they're not kept at Area 51, and that, you know, exploded with people saying former president said aliens are real. What does that mean? And then the rebuttal from Trump was all this sudden, let's move up the timeline if that's what it was, right?
Well, he also, Trump, if I remember correctly, and I'll have to just paraphrase, said, well, if he did that, he'd be revealing classified information.
Yes.
Which made everybody think, so you're saying it's true and classified.
Yeah, and then I think he replied something to the fact of, well, I don't know if they exist or not, but he shouldn't be saying those things because it's classified information. So it's kind of like, well, yeah,
why would one
you're
president
right.
know and not another one?
Exactly. So, but I mean, you try to get into the president's head. I don't know. It seems to me that it could have been kind of like looking at that and like, well, okay, Obama, are you trying to steal my thunder? I'm interested in this topic too, so let's get ahead of it. And okay, let's talk about it. I'm going to release more files. And suddenly it became an item agenda. Now people are wondering, well, where is that? Where is that coming from? Where are the files? And I would argue if he really has an intent to do this and he's doing it properly and he's listening to his advisors, this is not going to be an overnight thing. It definitely will not. This has to be methodical. It's got to be planned out. There's a lot of moving parts. You just don't release decades worth of secrets to that degree overnight. It could be catastrophic. So we got to have some patience.
Yeah. So obviously, right. And I was thinking, because we've all been, in the true crime world, we've been following the Nancy Guthrie case for 6 weeks. And I think in week 2, the president just sort of blurted it out on Air Force One. This is going to resolve soon. We've had something happen that we're going to have a resolution to the case. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but that was effectively his message. And here we are 6 weeks later, and that is absolutely not the case. So,
Yeah.
does that bode terribly for the notion that there's this overture to release decades and decades of secrets that maybe shouldn't be released in that way?
I might have some people angry at me, and I don't really care because I don't really, I see that I don't have an agenda. I want to know the secrets just as badly as anybody else. But I also, when I was at Georgetown, I convinced them to allow me to do my thesis in emergency and disaster management on the subject of ET disclosure. And I got no pushback, and it was great. But what I learned, and what I feel I learned, is the safest way to do this would actually be what we call the slow drip method. And I'm not worried about the speed. I am worried about the speed if someone were to come out and just randomly do it overnight and come to the pulpit, the podium, and just say, look, here's all the information we know. That could be very scary for society. But the fact that we're given promises and then they're kind of retracted and things don't pan out, it might look like we're taking steps further back, but I believe it's, to get technical, we call this hazard intrusiveness. So the more that somebody talks about, let's say, hurricanes or earthquakes in the household, they found the better prepared those people are, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're mentally going there, and then you might actually take proactive steps to prepare against one. So we just have to raise the temperature, if you will, and talk about the subject before I think we're really ready for the information. That's my opinion.
Well, to that end, the general's wife, I think her name is Susan McCasland Wilkerson, posted something on Facebook that I'm a bit bewildered by. I don't really understand why she might write this, but I think she's upset about a lot of people who are postulating about what may have happened to her husband, the theories that are out there, and I understand that. But he's missing, and all eyes are better on that case, on a missing person, than no eyes. And she posted this. Maybe the best these are her words. Maybe the best hypothesis is that aliens beamed him up to the mothership. However, no sightings of a mothership hovering above the Sandia Mountains have been reported. I mean, I know she's being sarcastic, but with his connections to these programs and to Project Blue Book and to the Wright Patterson Air Force Base and the research programs, it only stands to reason that people would think maybe there's some connection to his mysterious disappearance to his former work. Is it not plausible that it could be connected?
I think we have to keep an open mind to it. And like I've said, I don't think we have any of that connective tissue, if you will, to it. There's nothing substantive that would indicate that yet. However, I find that comment, as you did, very stark and just kind of like, oh.
Not helpful.
Is that really the right timing? Now, people grieve in different ways. And we have to remember, like, victims, if she is a victim of her husband being, lost, that she could use humor and things to kind of get over this. She's had a lot of time to think about it, but it wouldn't be my way of doing it. So I don't want to put my opinions on her feelings, like the way that she's feeling right now. But I'll tell you one thing. If I said that, if my wife went missing and I was joking about it and was like, well, some people think she was taken by aliens because of the type of work that I do. Well, there aren't any aliens around here. That is not where my mind is at all. I'm grieving. I'm probably not going to be on social media much at all, and I'm definitely not making jokes. Because if she shows back up and she sees what I wrote about her, oh, she would kill me, right? So I don't know. I think that comment seems out of place. I don't want to imply that maybe they didn't have a great relationship or anything like that. She's probably just dealing with it in her way with humor, but she does address the fact that people are wanting to make that connection of him being abducted for the knowledge that he may have had. And I do think we can't just brush it off and just say, well, we can't talk about that. This is just a missing persons case. At the very least, the intelligence agencies, I'd say FBI, it looks like Air Force intelligence is involved. Those guys are there because of that aspect of, yeah, they want to bring him back for sure. But they're there also because, number one, they want to know, is he going out and sharing secrets? Or number two, is someone trying to harm him for his secrets?
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So that's pretty much their involvement at this point, I believe.
So it's not that people are just guessing at this. There are reasons for people to believe that there might be something else.
The controversy is not that he had secrets, right? Because they could, maybe he had, I'm speculating here. Maybe while he was at the Air Force, he knows about the latest F-35, onboard sensors and technologies that we're using right now in war, right? And he's got all that information in his head, and it could be something totally unrelated to UFOs, most likely, in fact, but it's related to weapon systems and things like that. And someone takes him for his information. Hopefully he's not harmed.
An Iranian sleeper cell.
Yeah, it could be any of that. So what we don't know is if that is the motive and he was taken, then what is the information that he has that is so valuable? Is it valuable to sell, to tell someone else about, or is it valuable for them to try and force it from him? That's what we don't know.
You mentioned Chinese, you mentioned the Russians. Is there any scenario in which you see a possibility that Americans are involved, that he was grabbed by Americans who don't want him to either tell the president what he knows or don't want him to argue against what the president?
That is possible. I mean, if you talk to people, and again, I have no way to substantiate this at all, but the rumors of some of the whistleblowers have come out. We got David Grush, and Barber, and each one of them has some sort of a story, whether a full-on threat on their life or kind of odd things that have happened to them where they feel like they're shadow groups that are meant to intimidate, to silence, or possibly worse, but I find it kind of unlikely because he's been out of this game supposedly for over 13 years or more with his clearances. And if he was really a threat, he could have disclosed that at any time, right? So is it possible that as we're getting closer to disclosure, he's not playing the game they want him to play, right? Maybe they don't want him to go forward with Trump. And so there's that theory that like he was playing along and, okay, I'm going to do what you say. But then all of a sudden we have a president who wants this to come forward, and so let's pick him up and snatch him so he can't do anything about it. So we got to treat it like a criminal case at this point, I think is where you want to focus and look for foul play.
There's this other connection that his wife, Susan, mentioned. She said he'd been working with Tom DeLonge for a period as an unpaid consultant and on military and technical matters to help Tom DeLonge with his fiction and his media projects. Is there anything is there anything that anyone should make of the fact that he was working with someone who had a media project, or would he have kept his secrets to himself and helped where he could have in the project, and therefore this is probably unrelated?
Well, probably just get a little bit of background to your listeners too, because it's kind of esoteric for nerds like me. But Tom DeLonge, right?
And by the way, I say this a lot. Talk to me like I'm 5. I think it will help.
So Tom DeLonge, the lead singer of Blink-182, and Angels and Airwaves, and he came out, this was years ago, kind of stunning the world when they were very key in helping get the Navy Tic Tac video and other videos released, right, with Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon. And so when that To the Stars Academy was founded, was this organization that was part entertainment, nonfiction. I think they wanted to do some films and the books he wanted to write, fiction books, and then also actual disclosure and getting things coming forward. So he would always talk to somebody or people. I think Joe Rogan was one of them, where he talked about one of his key advisors. He just called the General, and Ross Coulthard does a good job explaining this better than me. But the General, we now know, was General McCasland, right? And so behind the scenes, and we know that because of the John Podesta leaks, but behind the scenes, they were working with Hillary Clinton's administration, with John Podesta, and it would seem, don't know, but it may have actually been sanctioned, at least by some parts of the government, that they wanted disclosure to come out in this way. So if that's true, if he was key to that, and you get this rock star, which it's kind of hard to comprehend, but I mean, if that's the way we want to go to get the youth involved and to get some cred, and to have him come out with some of these videos and disclosure, then would Neil, the General, would he be one of the people that would be the insider, because he had all of this information allegedly, to come out and be part of that disclosure, but then it was shelved. And why was it shelved? Well, again, the theory was they all believed that it was a shoo-in for Hillary to assume the presidency, and then that didn't happen. So then you got to work through the next administrations.
I want to wrap this up by getting you to repeat to me what it was your grandfather said on his deathbed.
Sure. So just take you back just a little bit. My grandfather, he died of cancer. I believe it started in his pancreas, went eventually to his brain, and he was under chemo and all sorts of treatment, radiation, for several years. So as he was getting sicker, my grandfather would often go with my father to the gym to try and keep his stamina the best he could. And the other thing they liked to do was watch TV shows, like Unsolved Mysteries was one of his favorites. And my dad would bring him lunch and bring it into the room for him. And it's like, hey, what do you think about this, Dad? I mean, you were there talking about Roswell, but this is Wright Patterson. We used to go there quite a bit. And he would just kind of nod and, that's interesting, or sometimes he'd say, that's ridiculous. And it was kind of his way of, like, I think, letting my dad know whether they were on the right trail or not. Well, this went on for a little bit till he got really sick. And one day they're at the gym, and my dad looked him in the eyes. And he said, Dad, Ben, I don't know if my other siblings, they definitely weren't into it like I was, but he says, Ben and I really want to know, and we know you're Wright Patterson. We know the rumors, the things that you were doing underground, the things you were working on. Are we alone? Is this real? And my grandpa stood up, and he got very kind of upset, and he said, I think it's time that we leave. They were joking, they were having fun, and then he changed his tone. And it was like when the grandpa looks you in the eyes and says, that's enough, it's over. And they left. It wasn't until, I believe it was at least a year later, on his deathbed. And I was actually on a date that night, and I was going to go visit him at the hospital. And I called my dad, and he said, I'm sorry, he just passed away. You just missed him, but we had a very interesting conversation I need to tell you about. And it was a very long time. Afterwards, he told me he was holding his hand, and he was going in and out of consciousness, that point where they're not even awake, and his eyes open up, and he had this moment of lucidity, and he looks at my dad, and he turns to him, and he says, son, I know you've been asking me. And he said, you need to know that we're not alone. Take care of your mother. Don't be afraid. And he passed away. And my dad knows that this wasn't a discussion about life after death. He already believed that. He knew my grandpa believed in that. It wasn't anything about being alone in that sense. It was specifically related to the question that he had asked him so many times. And he, in so many ways, was trying to tell him, on my way out the door, you know that I saw things, and I'm telling you, I'm privy to it. I'm not going to tell you how I know this, but we are not alone.
But he did say you're going to be okay.
Yeah, you know, and I'm writing a book at the moment too about this because, you know, like when we have so little to go off of, we love to analyze things to death. And looking at that one statement, I'm wondering what did he mean by "don't be afraid"? You know, was it "don't be afraid" because I know that the alien races or whatever we've contacted with are friendly? Was it, you know, "don't be afraid that maybe they're not friendly, but you're going to get, you know, you're going to be okay at the end of it, that we have control over it"? I have no idea. Or maybe he knew that there wasn't anything that we could do. So it's kind of like you're just comforting your son. It's like, hey, you know, it's going to be okay. Don't worry.
It is so good to talk to you. And we are going to do that other podcast of all of Grandpa's secrets that you could get out of him anyway, and all the conversations you had. Ben Hansen, thank you so much for this.
Thanks, Ashleigh.
So this is where we stand. I'm going to keep my eye on General McCasland's story and on the case and on the investigation. And we'll see if they come up with any signs, tips, information, leads, all of the above. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And remember this, truth isn't just serious, it's drop dead serious.